Okay, so today I'm going to show you guys how to basically take apart a Newell reel, do any kind of maintenance on it, show you how easy this is, and some things you may need to service your reel. Okay, so I'm going to be taking apart this 546. Typically you want to do it on just a table that you don't mind getting a little bit dirty or scratched up or anything. You want to have some sort of oil. I'm using this one, some kind of lubricant. For the screws and the frame and whatnot, you can use any kind of grease. They have this type of grease. There's the blue marine grease. I use this. It's a marine grade corrosion protection grease. It's a kind of like a dielectric, so it basically right here prevents thread freeze up, prevents electrolysis, and neutralizes the acids, alkalines, and salts. So basically the stainless screws that go into your aluminum frame, there's a lot of electrolysis going on between when the salt water is introduced. So this grease helps not only protect the materials, keep it from seizing, but it also slows down or curbs the electrolysis effect, which causes the corrosion and the aluminum parts to get all eaten up and stuff. So this is what I use. Okay, and the tools you want is, if your Newell uses slotted, you use a slotted screwdriver. Some of them use Phillips, so if you want to have a Phillips, mine doesn't, so I'm going to put this away. And then you need a 9/16 wrench for the cap nut. And I'll go into these two, but basically these are for the bearings. So I'll show you how to use those. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and take it apart and you're gonna see how easy this is. I go through the whole video where I'm gonna wipe the reel down and all that other stuff. I'm just gonna basically show you where to oil, what to lube, and I'm gonna put it back together. On the exterior, you can get like an oil like WD-40 or Relax, and you basically can just put it on a cloth and just wipe down all the parts, wipe down even the side plates, the stainless steel rings. Just wipe it down with some sort of oil, and that just helps protect the outside from the elements and keeps it looking good. I'm just taking off all the screws. The one major thing that Newells have that's a bad thing is the screws, if you don't do proper maintenance, tend to get stuck in the frame. So like I said, if you use a good grease on the screws, and maybe 2-3 times a year, just pop the screws out, re-grease, or check them, make sure the grease is still solid. You shouldn't have any problems. Another alternative to using like this grease is you use anti-seize, and you can put the anti-seize on your screws. And anti-seize is actually made to keep metals that are different metals, but they're bolted to each other or in each other or whatever. It keeps them from bonding together. So it's basically the same stuff you'd use with spark plugs in your engine block, because you have spark plugs and the engine block is like two different metals. So what you do here is, I got the side plate off, you can see the metal clicker. You're going to want to put lube right here. Let's see how much of this I got. Okay, you want to put lube around the clicker and the E-clip. That's how I do it. And then I put a little bit on the screw as well, just to kind of help protect it. Okay. This is the lube I'm using, but like I said, you can use the bearings on the spool. For the bearings, every once in a while you can just put one little drop of oil on it, spin it. If you want to clean these things, like how I have, I took off the outer race. You can soak them in like mineral spirits or denatured alcohol or something, soak them overnight, let them dry out, wipe them down, and then oil them again, and that cleans it. Otherwise, these things are relatively cheap. I usually just buy these every once in a while. I'll buy new bearings. So for the bearings, sometimes they're a little hard to get out of your reel. So what I have is I have two tools. Okay, the first tool is part of a kit that I got from Home Depot. They call it an extraction tool or extraction kit, and it comes with all these little tips, as you can see, and it's great for picking out of things or cleaning things or whatever. But one tip in particular that is useful is this one. As you can see, it's got a slight bend to it. Well, that's great for pulling out a bearing. You can stick it in there and you pull it right out, just like that. For me though, I tend to work on my Newells a lot. I have a lot of Newells. So I went ahead and I love this tool. It's cheap. I think this kit is like $5 at Home Depot. You can go ahead and look for it. It's called an extraction toolkit. This is the company for this particular one. But I went ahead and had one made. I have a custom bearing puller, and basically you tighten it, the tip opens and spreads and catches the bearing. So this is how this one is used. You poke it in there, you screw it down, and it pops it out. Now this is for bearings that just refuse to come out. Sometimes bearings are so stuck in there, you actually have to apply heat. You have to oil, heat, soak the bearing in oil overnight. Especially if it's a reel that you've bought in secondhand, or maybe you haven't done maintenance on the reel for a long time, and you know, now you're seeing the downsides of not maintaining your reel. Okay, so that's how you use the bearing pullers. This is just the spool. Put that on the side. Okay, now you can see all the internals. What I typically do here is I would wipe all this stuff down. I would wipe this all down with oil, clean it, wipe it down, and just do like an inspection, make sure there's no cracks or anything in here and stuff. Okay. For these screws, if you don't have a tib frame, you don't need to worry. If you have a tib frame, you don't have to worry about these. But if you're running the stock Newells, you can pop these out. You can just unscrew them. You put your screw in the grease and you screw them back in. Okay, and that keeps the screws from seizing up. Okay, so that's how you do those. But I just did these, so I'm not going to worry about them right now. Okay, so that's this side plate. You got the clicker grease. If you needed to grease the internal screws, you can pop those out. You can grease them, put them back in. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to go ahead and put this back because I'm done with this side. For the stainless steel rings, if you're really nitpicky about your cleaning, a lot of times underneath gets dirty and it gets some corrosion and build up. So you can go with the oil and a rag and just wipe it down. Okay. So let's put this ring back on because I'm done with this side. Okay. So what I like to do for the screws, I'll just show you real quick. I take my tub of grease, I just take one screw and I basically just go like this. I dip it in, just like that. And that's how I put that grease on. And that is something crucial. That's a must. Whenever you have Newell reels and you're doing servicing on them, you must grease the screws. Every single screw, every threaded part on this reel, I recommend putting some sort of protectant on, like grease. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and dip them each in the grease. And this grease is nice and thick. So it's not one of those greases where it runs with water or gets all goopy or anything. So it's very good grease. But like I said, you can use anything. A lot of people, they use that blue marine grease. They can get it in a big tub. It's cheap. You can use that super lube one, or for the bolts, if you want, you can use the anti-seize. That's all right. But the thing with the anti-seize is it's not necessarily a corrosion protector. It's basically, it keeps the metals from bonding, you know, but it doesn't actually prevent any kind of corrosion. So with the anti-seize, the bolts will still come out. They won't get frozen in your frame and stuff, but your frame can still corrode just because of the two metals. So it doesn't actually prevent electrolysis. It doesn't actually protect it like a grease would. So I would just recommend getting a grease. But if that's what you got, you know, whatever you have on hand, that's what you got. And then you got your bearing caps. You know, every once in a while, you can pop these bad boys out if you have a reel with removable bearing caps. Some of them are sealed or they're plastic, but if you got the metal ones, you can pop these bad boys out, and you can put a little bit of just a dab of grease just on the edge. So I just go like this, and there you can see it, the grease on it, and pop it back in, and that just keeps the threads and the bearing cup and everything nicely lubricated, because anything threaded on a Newell, you want it greased, you want it protected. Okay, so now we're gonna take apart the handle side. It's real easy. We're gonna take off the handle and everything first, since it's bolted on. You just need your 9/16. You're just gonna go over there. Take off your cap nut. Okay, and I got my washer off with it. Some of you may have a little clip here instead of a screw. So I usually take one of these tools from this extractor kit. I pop that clip off, but just make sure when you pop it off, that thing's gonna go flying. Make sure you do it in an area where it'll stay relatively close so you don't lose it. But this is a slotted / Phillips screw, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off, put it on the side. Now you can start removing your handle assembly, all your washers. Just spin the star off. Put that all down. Okay, now that we got that removed, I'm going to go ahead and take the side plate off. So normally I'll oil down the reel every once in a while, maybe a couple times a year, the external and everything like that. I'll wipe it down, clean it. For the internals, I do it one to two times a year. I take apart the reel, I grease everything up, lube everything up one to two times a year, and maybe every year I change the brakes. So I time it, so I do my brakes at the same time that I'm, greasing everything like that. And for the brakes, you can either use like smoothie drags, like those flat, waxy kind of smoothie brakes, or they make carbon fiber brakes. It's kind of like this black kind of fibrous looking brake. You can use any one of those two. And I'll just show you how the drag stack is oriented. Okay, we're going to pop the side plate off. Oh, one of them's still connected. This one. There we go. One of the screws were still stuck on. Same thing. If you want to take apart these bolts, you can take these off. You can put the grease on them. I'm not going to bother with these because I've done them already. so prior to this. Okay, so for this side, okay, let's put this all over there. So that's your bridge assembly. This is your gears, your jack handle. I'm going to go ahead and take off these 4 slotted bolts so I can take out my internals, show you where to lube, put them back, and call it a day. Newell is one of the easiest reels to work on. That's why I recommend them. Make sure when these screws particularly, when you put them back, you don't over tighten them, because if they're too tight and they're under a lot of strain, what ends up happening is you get cracks in your side plates. So you just tighten it down, but you don't have to crank it down, you know. Okay, so that's that. That's our side plate. That's what it looks like. And here's our internals. So this one, you can see the grease is kind of gunked up and dirty. I'm probably going to go down later and wipe it. But let's go ahead and take this off, and I'll kind of show you how everything is. So you got your bridge plate. This is your jack handle. This is what makes free spool and the regular engage for retrieve. You got your 2 dogs. As you can see here, it's really dirty. I'm going to go ahead and wipe this down. Okay, so, and then we got our last carbon washer in there. And these things tend to just really get stuck in there, so you gotta, that's why I like this tool. Okay. Okay, so there's our main gear. Okay, we also have this is the pinion gear right here. This is all our drags and washers. So the Newell will use 3 large ones, and there's a small one underneath, which you can see right there. But this is the 3 main washers. Basically, the orientation is going to be a drag washer, then a regular disc, and then a drag washer, and then the disc with the little nipples on the sides where it locks into the gear, and then another drag washer, and then you'll have another flat disc with your cone washer, and that is your layout right there. So it's going to be drag, washer, a drag, carb disc, a disc. You got a metal washer, a disc, another metal washer, but the middle one is going to have the little nipples on the edge. You got another washer, and then another metal disc, and then the cone will go on the very top. And then after that, it will be your gear spacer with whatever washers you have on top of that, the spacers. Okay, and then that's how you do your drag stack. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go and get some paper towels. I'm going to clean this up, and I'm going to put some lube, and I'm going to just kind of wipe things down, and I'll be right back. Okay, so just go ahead, wipe off all that old gunky grease. Sometimes a Q-tip is good for this kind of stuff. Wiping off everything off the dogs. Let's give it a quick wipe down. To get the pinion gear off, all you gotta do is bend this down a little bit, you pop it, and then it slips right out. Okay. So for the pinion gear, once again, I take my extractor tool, take the paper towel, and I just kind of rub it down. I just kind of get in those grooves. It's hard to get. The paper towel helps catch all the grime and dirt and stuff. This particular reel, I bought it pre-owned. It was used, so it's seen its days. It's had some wear and tear, but it's still running strong. It's particularly important to make sure you clean your pinion gear if you want your gears and everything running nice and smooth. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get underneath there. If you really want to clean good, you can take this off. You just pop these little clips out. You can remove this whole thing, and then you can clean all underneath the jack and the yoke and everything. Okay. So that's pretty good. Okay, so we're gonna put our pinion gear back. Once again, you just pop it, slip it in, and then it's all fine. Okay, the main gear needs some cleaning. Just gonna wipe this thing down. And like even all these little fins on the main gear, you can go with your fingernail or that extraction toolkit that I showed you. You can wipe it down, but this one's not bad. Okay, kind of wipe that all down. All right. The washers, same thing. You want to go ahead and wipe them down. You can wipe them down while you get the reel apart. You know, that's just kind of how I am. I like to do that. The drag washers, you can put a little bit of drag grease on there. You don't have to. I typically run them dry. So you're gonna put your first carb washer. These things, they don't, you know, they don't necessarily. It doesn't matter if you put one side or the other. Okay, and then metal disc. Okay, and then another washer, and then you're gonna, the middle one is always gonna be the one with the little nipples on the edge, and that goes, it locks right into the gear. Okay, the washer, and then that's it. That's your last metal washer, and then for the flat. And then always remember the top has the cone washer. So that's the one washer, it has a little bit of a cone. That basically helps to, when you're locking down your star and it puts pressure on your drag stack, it helps to just distribute the weight equally, compress it down, and give even pressure. If you didn't have that cone there, it would be hard to do that, yeah, if it was flat. Okay? So we get the drags put together. If you were changing your drags, that's how you'd do it. To put some lube on the bridge plate, you're just going to put lube around the jack handle, the spring, by the eccentric lever. I put by the dogs and the spring. And this thing's almost out. There we go. Okay, dogs and the spring. And then I just kind of press it in there, get it going. Okay, so you want your jack handle underneath your yoke and the handle, and then by your two dogs, that's where you want the lube. Okay, let me put a little bit more. So this thing is almost out. And they have different grease and stuff you can use, but you can kind of see how I've got my grease. I got the grease on the dogs right here on the spring. The jack handle's got some grease. I got grease on the spring here. And you can, like I said, you can use different grease. Certain greases are like thinner than others, certain are thicker. So, okay, when I put this back, that's it. That's how you grease it. You just change your drags. I mean, you can, you know, you want to put more grease, you can put more grease. You know, don't put too much, but you want enough to cover all the moving parts in there. And you put it back. This part, okay, so the two dogs, on the 5 series there's 2, 4 series there's only 1, but you want to make sure your dog here is facing down, and then this dog here is facing towards the pinion. It's hard to see, but I can see the dog right there, and it's basically grabbing on to the other end of this gear. But you just test it, turn it, and then as you turn, go back and make sure the dogs are hitting and engaging and they're not slipping or they're not underneath this thing. So you can hear it, and I'm turning back, and it's not reversing, so that means that the dogs are properly placed. Okay, and that's it. We're gonna go ahead and put this back. If you needed to oil your other bearing, you can do so right here. It's right there. I'm gonna put one little drop on it. All right. Make sure you got everything together. You got all your parts. You don't want to take this thing apart and only to find out you need to do more stuff. Okay. Okay, we're gonna put the reel back together. Okay, you're gonna get your slotted screws, put them in there, get them going. Okay. Let's put all this back. Okay, so there's gonna be 4 slotted screws. For the 5 series, they're all the same size, but other series, the 2 top ones are usually shorter, and the bottom ones are longer. Okay, just tighten them all down. And I'm holding the bridge plate on the other end to the side plate so it doesn't come off. You can also put grease on these screws if you want. I'm not doing it now, but normally I would. But just for the video's purposes, so it doesn't take too long, I'm just doing a quick rundown. Okay, but if you wanted to, you can put grease on them. This is where they come out. You can see the holes of those things coming out. Okay, so just make sure your bridge plate's sitting nice and flush. You can test your lever and everything. Test your anti-reverse while it's loose and separate. Okay, and then let's put the reel back together. Put my spool back on. There's my bearing. Put the spool back in. When you do this, make sure you don't have any line pinching through between the spool and the inner ring. Make sure it's seated nicely. Okay. That's it. I'm going to put it back on. I usually put it on free spool when I pop the side plate back on. Slip it on there, line it up. Okay, make sure it's seated nicely. And then same thing with your screws. You're just going to take your screw, dip it in your grease of choice, put it in there, and start putting it back together. Sometimes you may kind of have to find where the thing is lining up. So when you're screwing it in, you might have to just kind of wiggle the side plate just to make sure it's all lined up when you're putting that first screw on. Okay, I'm going to dip, put the screw in, dip, put the screw in, and don't be afraid to, really gob it, because basically it's just more protection, and it actually ends up pouring out of the screw hole, and then it ends up kind of sealing the outside and keeping the water from penetrating the outside. Okay, I'm going to go down the line and just screw all this together. Okay, screwing it all together. I always recommend using the slotted screws because they tend to not strip as easily. The Phillips will always strip more, they'll strip faster. So if you can upgrade to the slotted, the stainless steel slotted, use those, because like I said, the Phillips, they tend to be, they strip faster with very little pressure. I've seen the Phillips really strip. The best ones is always the slotted. Okay, so we got all our screws, we got the side plate on, everything's in there. We're just gonna put this stack back. So this is your spacer. It's just gonna go right in there. It fills it up. You can use whatever washers you had with the reel, or sometimes people sell additional washers, but I got these. Basically, these washers just take up space to keep the star from hitting the bearing cup. It lifts it up a little bit more, so the star, when you crank it down, it's not hitting the side plate. So this threads, I also like to add a little bit of grease. So you just go with your finger, Q-tip, whatever you have, and just kind of wipe it on the threads right there. And that keeps anything from seizing up on the threads of this gear sleeve itself. Okay, so we're gonna put the star on. Always put the star on with the higher side facing in, because that's the side that it pushes up against the drag stack. And then this, when you're threading it on, just you gotta kind of turn and get this thing to catch. And then once it catches, it just spins on freely. Okay. You just turn it till it gets all the way down. Okay, and then we're going to put the rest of our washers on. So on your handle, like I said, you can put grease again. The handle, there's two parts where it touches. It touches the inside and then it touches the outside, so you can see where the washers would go. It helps to add a little bit of grease right there, just right there, because you do have aluminum and stainless touching. So that's where you're going to need that protection. Okay, so you put one washer down, and that's actually going to catch on that lip, and it's going to stop the handle from going down any further. And you put your handle, and then the next washer. Your reel may have more washers on this than mine. It all depends on how your reel is configured. Sometimes there's little wavy washers that just basically act as spacers in between if your reel has particularly like a lot of play. Okay, I'm going to put the screw back on right here. And then last is going to be your cap nut and the little plastic washer that goes over. And that just kind of keeps things from moving around too much, and it seals this cap nut. So the cap nut, same thing, you're just going to want to start it nicely. You got to get this thing to catch, because sometimes these things will go on crooked. So you have to make sure that when you're putting it on, it's nice and straight, because you don't want to cross thread this thing. So make sure it catches nice, because you don't want this thing going on crooked. And then you'll be tightening it down with the wrench. Tighten as much as you can by hand, because then that'll prevent cross threading. Yeah. Okay, it's on there. It's pretty snug. I'm just gonna go ahead with my wrench, give it a couple of turns. That's it, and that's how you service the reel. So, taking out the side plates, removing the bearings, took apart the internals. We removed the drag stack. I showed you all the drags, what areas to lube. All of this outside aluminum, you want to go with a rag and some WD-40 or Real-X, and you just wipe it all down. Typically, you're going to see the salt build up in the corners here like this. So you go with a rag, Q-tip, some oil, and you just wipe it all down, clean it. If your reel is real dirty, or you're really picky about how your reel is, you can completely strip this thing down, take even the inner frame and the rings off, and you can clean all of that stuff. If your stainless steel has discoloration or corrosion, they make polishing compounds. I have one that where if I have a particular metal that's really tarnished or oxidated, it's white, milky, they make these polishing compounds. You can get any kind of polishing compound from chrome, silver, any of that stuff. You rub it on with a rag, let it sit for a little bit, and then you rub it off, you polish it off, and that usually gets off any of the imperfections, and it really shines it up. That's good for the colored serial reels where you have the silver handles and silver stars. Those things really tend to oxidize. So the polishing compound I recommend for that. So that's it. After you put your reel together, you want to just test it. Make sure everything works. Your anti-reverse is stopping how it should. Engage your ratchet. Make sure your ratchet works. Free spool. Make sure it's spinning. Yep, spinning. Mine isn't spinning that much because I have my rub line attached to it, but I can feel the play is good. You wiggle it back and forth. Free spool is working. Put it back in. Make sure to retrieve. Everything's engaged. And then last, you want to check your drags and your, make sure your drag stack's working. So tighten down your star, get some line, pull it. Okay, And then you're gonna loosen up the star a little bit. It should be easier. Yep. And that's it. So crank that line back in and you're ready to fish. And that's how you service a Newell. Okay, thanks a lot. Hope you enjoy.